Hello, I'm Sarah Jack. I'm a therapist in lockdown in Dorset.
And I'm Annie Power, and I'm a therapist in lockdown in London. And the theme that we're looking at today is the experience of a couple where one or both of them are having much more contact with their own families than they were prior to lockdown. We're thinking of a couple with two men, and I'm thinking of the avoidant partner is having this unaccustomed contact with one of his parents, feeling that it's necessary to make a duty call to his parent. This is quite an unaccustomed kind of behavior for an avoidant person. They might perhaps normally phone the parent once a month or less. And so to feel they must do it every day puts quite a burden on them. But avoidant people often are very, very thoughtful, kind. They do a lot of caring, dutiful tasks. So it's not unlikely that an avoidant person would set themselves this kind of task, but then feel really very drained by it because they've used up almost their quota of empathic interaction for the day. And it might mean that there is even less available for their more preoccupied partner. And I think that's probably enough of that little vignette. And Sarah's got a contrasting one.
Yes, I was thinking about, let's say, the preoccupied party in lockdown, maybe very anxious, maybe having loads of contact with friends, maybe contact with friends and family all day long. But whatever the contact, this might leave the avoidant partner really feeling quite shut out, really not feeling that they don't matter very much. This could really bring out feelings that are unresolved in the avoidant partner of jealousies that they're not really aware that they have. What they might feel might be somewhat shut out, and as a response to this endless contact the preoccupied partner is having with family is to pull back, go back into that very comfortable self-reliant place that they feel inside. It's a bit like going on their island, really, but from their island they might also go back into a place of devaluing, which is also a typical trait of the avoidant partner. This, of course, is not going to bode well when, let's say, the preoccupied partner comes off the phone and meets with, something that dismisses them or puts them down, rather than a connection after the phone with each other again. What are your thoughts, Annie?
I think that formula where the person having all the extra contact is the preoccupied person is an easy one to imagine. And of course, it's more in tune with what's gone on before lockdown. To some degree, that will have been happening all along for that couple. I think one of the real difficulties for a couple is if the partner who is the pursuer, the preoccupied one, gets so fed up with trying to get the ear of their avoidant partner that they start turning outside more and more, perhaps to a specific person.
I think you're right. They could more and more be starting to turn to friends, having even longer phone calls, having even less time with the avoidant partner, who's really starting to feel they just don't count by this point. And, jealousy, I think, is one of those emotions that, is still seen as an incredibly shameful emotion. I think, society is more accepting of sadness and anger these days, but, not really jealousy. It almost seems to be one of those emotions that you're just supposed to just not have. And I see jealousy as one of those emotions that makes people feel that they're wiped out, can really tap into a real sense that they just don't exist, and can really have quite extreme reactions to.
A feeling of not existing is pretty devastating. I think also there's a kind of shame that comes about jealousy, that it's childish and we shouldn't feel that. And another attachment theme that I think is illustrated in this idea of one partner having a lot of contact with their family is the idea of care-seeking skills and caregiving skills. And I was saying earlier, avoidant people, although they're not usually tuned in emotionally very deeply, they can be very generous in their instrumental care. They will do tasks like driving people around, perhaps not at the moment driving people around, cooking. They'll see what needs to be done, and they might be very generous that way, but they find it very difficult to be generous emotionally. But in terms of care seeking, what I mean is care seeking skills. The risk with this couple that we keep imagining with a pursuer and a withdrawer is that the pursuer, when they seek care, will tend to do it with reproach. So rather than saying, I'd love it if we can sit down this evening and get some time together, they'll say, I never get any time with you. And the avoidant person finds it very difficult to ask at all, because they find it difficult to name to themselves that they have those longings for support and care. And what a typical kind of story from an avoidant partner would be, you never helped me when I was trying to get a new job. When I lost my job and I was trying to do a new CV, you wouldn't help me, even though you're an HR professional. And the preoccupied person says, what do you mean? You didn't ask me. And the avoidant person will say, well, I did ask you. And they probably asked once quietly, and the other person was distracted, and they just weren't able to ask again, because to them that was a massive rejection. It was so hard to ask at all. It's a sign of secure attachment when we're able to ask in an appropriate way and in a sustained way if necessary, and that if a partner does say no, we're able to not to take it as a rejection, but to say, hey, are you listening? I'd like your help.
And for the avoidant party, possibly it would be hard to decipher from what they said that they actually had been asking for help if you were actually to read it. And for them it's a real sign of weakness to ask for help.
Yes.
They don't want to go anywhere near this side of themselves that they've really tried hard to banish.
That does put it the most clearly, I think, that it feels to them a sign of weakness, because growing up, what was applauded was that they coped with everything alone, and coped with everything means, above all, they coped with their feelings alone.
Yes, albeit they paid the price of feeling very removed from people, maybe keeping themselves on the periphery of connections with others in order to sustain that.
Before we end this reflection on more contact with families, thinking a bit, one factor we haven't mentioned is stepchildren, because I think that's quite a big one. Caring for your own children is one, but when caring for stepchildren or one's partner having a lot of extra contact with their children, if they're not one's own children, this is an extra kind of taxing in a different way.
Yes, and you certainly could be having a teenager arrive back in the house that maybe doesn't usually live in this household, or certainly doesn't live in this household that much these days because they're back from university. You know, maybe they're now not just hormonal but also a bit nocturnal because they've been able to practice some adult time on their own and they want a different bedtime than the parents, but they're now back in this house. And, you know, if they're on the preoccupied side of things, they could have come back with a hell of a lot of anger and resentment that they're having to come back, but also they're of a nature that they're going to protest a lot and complain a lot anyway. And there's no respite for families at the moment. There's no respite whereby parents can go out and have some reprieve and have something nice happen that means that they can go back into the fray. There's no room for the teenagers to even get a break.
Perhaps a final point is that we've been talking about phone calls, but obviously a lot of the connecting that's happening is online. And there's a whole new etiquette around group online conversations. And if we ring your family on Friday night online and we ring my family online on another night, and who joins that call, and of all the sort of different households who are joining that call, how much attention they seem to be giving it. I think there's quite a lot of opportunity for either people to feel left out or to feel that too much demand is being made of them to join in.
Well, yes, a very good point. And let's say a family wants to all get together on Zoom, and this is a great, exciting idea, but let's say one of those parties always steer clear of being part of that group dynamic. Maybe it's, you know, again, I think it could really stir up unresolved jealousies and sibling rivalries that they've been able to lay to rest because they just visited their family on their own without the other siblings around.
Yes, that's a really interesting aspect. So we could get into a sibling conversation. So it would be interesting, but we probably covered what we plan to cover. Thank you for listening. Usually when preoccupied people threaten to leave, what they really mean is, do you care enough to come and find me?